Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about Ohio Smart Ag Solutions from the Land project. We actually started out several years ago. My good friend Ernie Shea and myself visited a foodie convention in Chicago, and we had a meeting with the Kellogg Foundation, and they were interested in doing a food security environmental impact called action someplace in the Midwest. And of course, being that I'm from Ohio, I said, well, how about Ohio? And so they very willingly and graciously granted us gave us a grant, and we went ahead and formed the Ohio Smart Ag Solutions from the Land concept, and very, very lucky to have Lisa as my co-chair. I didn't actually want to be the co-chair, but I ended up being anyway. But we got together and we put a design team together, and then we also the design team decided the way it should be laid out, and we put a steering committee together. And the steering committee was really very, very broad and very differential as far as anything that had to do with agriculture, all the way up the food chain to the consumer themselves. We did. So how about the next slide, Lisa? You advance it. There we go. So this was really what the design team did, was put together this this mission statement as well. Then as we got the people together, we had farmers, agribusiness owners, anti-hunger advocates, conservationists, public health advocates. We had equipment manufacturers, but it was also co-facilitated by the Ohio State University INFACT folks, their plan, and then also our Solutions from the Land, our 501c3 that I'm also co-chair of. And as we decided what the purpose of our mission should be, is to retain a strong, vibrant farm economy and workforce, as well as to assure a healthy population with access to nutritious food. That's each and every one of us to have access to it. But also at the same time, how do we preserve Ohio's land, air, and water while we do this? How do we do this in an environmentally friendly way? Next slide. So what we really did is, when we got the members of the steering committee together, we soon learned that agriculture is more than just food and feed. There's lots of other things that agriculture provides in the state of Ohio as well as in the world. So we not only have food and feed, but we have fiber, for different like cotton and things like that, and clean energy. Ohio's got 6 different biofuel plants that actually make biofuel that's mixed in with gasoline. And at the same time, as we talk about the way we grow crops, so we can also figure out ways that we can lower our carbon footprint and provide ecosystem services. That's different than what we have done in the past. So there's a whole plethora of functions of agriculture that we may not have thought about, but it was a really rich discussion that we had as we went through this process with all of the stakeholders around the table. We all had a chance to learn. Next slide. Well, and one thing that we had to really look at is, not only do we have local challenges, but we have global challenges. The biggest thing that we have to think about is I'm a farmer, and we grow crops, and so I'm all about productivity and feeding people. Well, when you really look at the statistics, we're going to have to feed anywhere from 9 billion to 10 billion people, someplace in there, by 2050. That means we're going to have to double our food production. But how do you double food production without doing irreparable environmental damage? Well, you have to do it, and we can do it. We got different techniques and things that we can do today that we didn't do 20, 30 years ago. And we're going to have to do that. But you also can do things that's going to actually leave your land in better shape. So one thing we can't keep doing is converting farmland, from other ways, whether it's forestry or whether it's grasslands and things like that. We need to raise more with the same amount of land that we have in production as well. And we got to stop the increased degradation of our nutrients and our sediments that are leaving our farms, and that means we have to keep it covered. The other thing too we might have to look at is biodiversity. You know, one of the things that's really influenced what we grow is this market, and so we actually are growing what the market's telling us to grow, which is basically corn and soybeans, with some pretty good batch of wheat too. But at the same time, when we get into more of a monoculture type of way of farming, we also decrease the way that the soil is taking place. So those microbes need to be plentiful and growing in that soil, and so we have to do that. Maybe we have to put cover crops and things like that in there. But the other thing too, we're trying to do this with increased severe weather events. And anybody that has seen this spring that's farming knows how severe it is. You know, we have the wettest spring on record. Half the corn is planted in Ohio, and you're not even that much soybeans. So there's an awful lot of land that's not even going to be planted right now. So how do we cope with the increased changes in weather patterns, at the same time raise more? So these are all the things that we have to look at, not only on a global challenge, but also in an Ohio challenge. Next slide. So, but when you really look at what Ohio has to offer, it's amazing, because Ohio is the land of plenty when it comes to agriculture. You take in 2017, Ohio was 8th in corn production, 7th in soybean production, 4th in tomato production, 3rd in egg production, 8th in hogs and pigs, 7th in the number of farms nationally. And agriculture and food was the largest industry in Ohio. So it really is the big kahuna in Ohio. $124 billion worth of economy to the state itself. 1 in 8 people work someplace in the food production or feed production system. We have some of the most fertile land in the country, especially where I live in the Darby Plains area west of Columbus here in Plain City. It's some very, very good quality soils. But at the same time, we have to be very prudent to make sure that the soils remain healthy and vibrant for the future. We grow grains, oil seeds, fruits, meats, eggs, dairy, vegetables, and a whole lot more. 14 million acres of production, over 75,000 operations that provide for the state, the nation, and the world. So we are definitely a powerhouse. Next slide. But we have some challenges, and this is where I really learned a lot from our co-chair Lisa. We in the country that raise food and feed, we sort of live in oblivion, not really understand the whole food chain and how food actually gets distributed. And that's one of the things that was remarkably challenging when I started learning these things. And I did not know this, but Ohio ranks 38th nationally in food security. 1 in 7 individuals and 1 in 5 children are food insecure. That's in Ohio. That's embarrassing. When we have this glut of commodities like corn and soybeans, here we have people that are actually going hungry. That's not something we should be proud of. We also rank 46th out of 50 in health value, and that how discouraging is that? That's not something that we should be proud of. We need to fix that. Nutrient pollution from agriculture is a leading cause of water quality impairment. We all have heard about the dissolved reactive phosphorus that's leaving our farms and getting into the drainage streams and rivers that go to Lake Erie and cause a lot of algae blooms and in the summer months where the fishing and the recreation has really been hurt, as well as cities like Toledo that has actually had to shut down the water leading to the consumers because they couldn't take there was too much of the algal blooms to take out of. We've also lost more than 7 million acres of farmland since 1950, which is nearly a third of the state's land. It's simply to other things like development and other uses of land. So we're trying to, our productivity's been way up, but we still are doing on a less basis of acres. We also rank number 2 in the United States for losing wetlands, and that's not a good thing because wetlands function as a filter for a lot of our runoff and things like that. So that's important. But the biggest thing that we're experiencing as we speak is the changing climatic conditions. And that's a threat multiplier. Last year as we were growing our crops, we had 7 different events where we had more than 2 inches of rain at a time during our growing season. That's never happened before. And again, this spring, we had another wet season. We never had a March to work in the fields. We had to dodge thunderstorms in order to get our crops planted this spring. And, you know, my neighbor planted 1 day, and that was it. That's all he got planted. Northwest Ohio didn't get much of anything planted. So 50% of the corn got planted this year and about 40% of the soybeans. And so the changing climatic conditions make it really, really tough and almost impossible to provide adequate amounts of food, feed, and fiber and energy that we have in the past. So we're going to have to do something about that. The other thing too is farmers are aging. The average age of a farmer in Ohio is about 58 years old, and we have to make sure that our young folks get interested in staying on the farm or coming back to the farm, so we have the right people working the land in the right way. Next slide. Water quality, health, nutrition. Those are the things that we have to do at the same time. We can't just have productivity. We have to understand the way we produce things has a great response to how our water quality is. At the same time, we have to produce the right calories, the right kind of foods that can promote good, healthy folks and actually have access to this thing and highly nutritious feed and food. So we have to do that. At the same time, you know, with all of the pressures of a changing climate, it's really, really going to be tough. But those 3 things are something we have to really look at. Next slide. So I'll end with this slide. There's 2 ways we could go. I mean, this is one of the things that we could do nothing, and like on the left side where it talks about status quo, where we can live with the fact that we have fewer farmers and tighter regulations, continue to have water quality loss. We continue to watch the rural communities decline, use up our farmland in an irresponsible way, keep on losing our diversity, and keep having more extreme weather. Or we can look at what kind of solutions can we find from the land. And so this is what the things that we really, really bear down and worked on with our steering committee. How do we increase food chain diversity, soil health and quality? How do we make all farmers prosper, whether you're big or whether you're medium-sized or whether you're small? How do you figure out direct marketing places that we can have increased profitability? How do we keep the communities prospering in those rural areas that have to keep losing jobs? How do we become more diverse? How do we gain some of those new markets that we haven't even thought about yet? At the same time, how do we fix the water quality issues in Ohio? How do we figure out the ways that we can keep those nutrients in place through maybe things like cover crops and things like that to make sure that dissolved reactive phosphorus stays put and doesn't leave our fields? How do we become more diverse? How do we figure out new and innovative ways that young farmers can come on the land and be prosperous? And how do we have the right policy in place that we can actually prosper in this way too? At this point, I want to turn it over to Lisa, and she'll finish the rest of the slide.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for everybody that was joining us today. Really appreciate the opportunity to preview for you this really exciting transformational initiative, and I certainly am very humbled to serve as the co-chair of this esteemed group with Fred Yoder. Fred has taught me a lot more than I think he's learned about hunger. We at the association have had the great good fortune to work with Ohio farmers, growers, and commodity producers for some 20 years now through our Ohio Agriculture Clearance Program, which is a public-private partnership. So we really understand that policies and practices come together to ensure that low-income Ohioans have access to healthy, wholesome food that they need to engender an active, healthy life. We need more, not less. And that's kind of what brings me here. And as Fred said, that we really are facing some pretty significant threats as well as challenges of an unpredictable global environment. And Ohio's agriculture, as Fred has said, is going to have to adjust to the conditions in order to maintain a style of farming and food systems that are going to benefit not only just the producers, but the consumers, the public, and the planet at large. I think when we started this process, none of us could have believed for a minute that we would find ourselves in a situation where we have, as Fred said, experienced some of the most significant shifting weather patterns and extreme precipitation during this growing season. The uncertainty of markets, certainly as a result of the trade tariffs that are destabilizing much of the food production and agriculture production that Ohio relies on. So again, this is an intensive process. I think the time is absolutely right. And for the first time in my history of doing public policy, we are seeing a new, renewed emphasis on agriculture within the state of Ohio, including the promising H2 Ohio initiative that the governor has introduced. And I'm pleased to say that the Senate has made even a greater investment in that initiative. So agriculture, I believe, is really poised now more so than ever to bring the policies and the practices together to really truly meet the needs of tomorrow. So when we look at, kind of where are we at in a call to action that emphasizes that we really need to be focused on Ohio's smart agriculture in the long term, is a comprehensive initiative that's going to require us to sow the seeds along at least 3 pathways at once, which is agriculture as a system, and all of the recommendations together are the priorities that are going to help us transform thought as we envision them for the future. And that's going to be including looking really at the reduction of hunger and improving nutrition by supporting the production of more fruits, vegetables, animal proteins, and food grade grains for human consumption is a priority. The creation of jobs that are going to generate the economic growth of diversity and sustainability, and intensifying production, certainly for processing of food, feed, fiber, and renewable energies. But also, as Fred said, we've really got to augment the ecosystems as well through this process. So first and foremost, if agriculture and our farmers are not profitable, then we are going to suffer across the spectrum, including in our rural communities. And I've talked a lot about this with my own staff about our concerns with these extreme weather conditions and the inability for farmers to get their crops planted this year, how that's going to translate and trickle through rural economies. So again, being very focused in a holistic way to ensure that we're building those strong communities and engaging consumers and ensuring that public health is also a major focus. Too many of our public dollars are spent in a sick healthcare model. We see it within those who stand in our lines at food pantries, soup kitchens, and homeless shelters. More than half are suffering from chronic diet-related diseases. They know what they need to treat these chronic diet-related diseases, diabetes being the largest one, which is access to healthy, wholesome, nutritious fruits and vegetables and lean protein items. So again, the dollars that we could save from the reduction of poor health outcomes as well as the reduction of food insecurity are going to allow us to reinvest those dollars into other areas that are really about what we need to move this system into our own mid-century goals that we need to realize through this process. So in coming up with that, the steering committee has worked very hard at these pathways, and I'm going to go through some of these pathways. I also want to make sure that we send out the link not only to the executive summary, but the full report that goes into a much deeper dive on each one of the pathways that we have come up with. And these are what we think of as shovel-ready projects that could be easily deployed into the key initiatives for particular issues around how do we strengthen agriculture and bring these systems together, and certainly the forming and properly resourcing a Farm, Food, and Health Partners Alliance. We're hearing much more about the social determinants of health, and this is really an opportunity to bring all of these key stakeholders together. The other is how can we align our state agencies to work more effectively together in coordinating both food, health, and agriculture programs. I'm not going to go over all of these, but again, to kind of understand where we're at, that it's not just any one system. We've really looked at a full spectrum of how do we ensure that we've got quality and regular access and demand for locally grown food, that we're also looking at food preferences for consumers, the diversification of value added, financing for food systems and food systems authority. One of the other things that a lot of the producers talk to us about is that we've got to restore the processing abilities and supply chain for Ohio grown and raised foods. I know this is a huge priority for local food systems as well, but also not leaving out the bioproducts and bio ecosystems as well as our food quality. So going on, again, these are really exciting and detailed, much more so in the full report. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the initiative one, which is to make agriculture and the food system a public policy priority. You know, this is a pet peeve of mine, and I'm just going to say it. Agriculture, we hear, is Ohio's #1 industry. If it's Ohio's #1 industry, you could not tell that if you look at the overall investment from a state budget standpoint. It has one of the smallest budgets of all state government, and we need to do a lot more to ensure that the resources are there, especially for new initiatives. And again, I have to applaud Governor DeWine for making that investment in H2 Ohio, providing additional resources at which to look at water quality issues. But I think that this is an opportunity, again, to rebuild and rebalance as we look at how do we ensure that agriculture, food, farm, and health partners are working together in a much more coordinated way, that we're working on an interagency arrangement, including a task force to align these agencies to work more effectively together, especially as it relates to food as medicine, food as health, and what kind of and how do agriculture producers, especially food producers and fruits and vegetables, play an active role and have a seat at the table in making sure that happens. And restoring our state government to a marketer and a champion as well as a regulator of agriculture goods and services in the state of Ohio. That's Initiative 1, and under Initiative 1, there are a number of additional deployable shelf-ready projects that we have. Initiative 2 is really looking at the diversification and sustainability, intensifying of production. And as Fred said, we're not limited to just food. We are looking at well as at feed, fiber, and fuel. Integrating as well our commodities with diversified, identifying preserved and value-added agricultural production as our ecosystems, as well as our public support for agriculture. Again, really important as we look at what we do needs to be based in research, and we need the resources to be able to ensure that our best practices can be brought to scale. Overall, overwhelmingly, not only an aging farmer base, but we've got to do more in the way of the promotion of workforce development and resources as far as land access, as well as ensuring that we have a strong agricultural economy. We need to create a strategy to strengthen the value added for woodland supply chains and create new markets for residual forestry products. Talked a lot about this, not something that generally and traditionally we think of in agriculture, that we need to do more of. We also want to really utilize and much more promote institutional buying power and be able to ramp up Ohio's smart food. Consumers want to know who's producing their food. They want food produced closer to them. They want to know the producer. It's not just the individual consumer. We're seeing and a food preference from institutional buyers as well. So how do we really make the investments necessary to help develop the infrastructure to ensure that we are encouraging that commitment of locally purchased foods and that a readily available supply of food, that we're developing as well an independent food system financing authority to help pay for the development of the processing and the infrastructure. Again, I think great opportunities exist here. A lot of livestock producers have said that because of a lack of processing, one of the things that they'd really like to see is the development and pilot of a small-scale mobile meat processing unit that we believe has got some real potential here for local producers. And then just the issues of regularly evaluating what the food needs and preferences are of Ohioans through ongoing surveys and expansion of more partnerships in the process. And Initiative 4, what we're looking at as well, excuse me, is the implementation of a landscape scale and climate smart agriculture strategies to ensure that we have really the sustainability and abate agricultural runoff. And again, when we started this process, we could have never imagined that where we would be at now is a much larger focus on ensuring that we are protecting one of our greatest resources, and that's the resources of Lake Erie and the Great Lakes region. And then by 2020, the state of Ohio and our stakeholders should formulate and implement a new state water quality strategy, including the current public and private sector resource response and initiatives. And that's really the backbone, and the support is going to come from H2 Ohio, and we're really excited about that. And again, just an opportunity to lift up the role of agriculture and the many and diverse players that we have in the development of this climate smart agriculture plan for Ohio Ag to help farmers adapt, improve the resilience and the delivery of products of goods and services that are going to have to be mitigated as we really address the rapidly changing climate conditions that are impacting the quality of life, both urban and rural, and putting at risk our food systems. We also need to be able to track and publish statewide progress on data for continuous improvement, which we all know is extremely important to all of us. So what this is about is that this is an Ohio-based project run by Ohioans, making sure that Ohioans are making agriculture and our food systems the public policy priority, that we are developing the infrastructure and using the industrial purchasing power to quantify and increase our markets for Ohio Smart Ag, and that we're really focused on the diversification and sustainability, intensifying the production of food, feed, fiber, and fuel, and that this is really about systems, a systems change. And we ask that all of you join us in the dialogue to make Ohio Smart Agriculture front and center as we move forward in ensuring that we address some of the biggest challenges that we have before us. And certainly none of our brothers and sisters, our children who are the future, our seniors, should be making choices between food and medicine. And I'll close it up there and open it up for any questions that you may have at this time.
Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to say that there is a nice paragraph in the chat box, so I'll read that just in case everybody can't see it, but it's Charlie Gonzalez from Green Umbrella and the Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council. He said, "Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate your efforts and reviewed the solutions from the land documentation. I'm especially excited to hear you talk so much about soil health on this webinar, because that was one thing that really stood out to him about the written plan that seemed to lack an explicit emphasis on soil, only mentioning it once or twice. As Michaela shared with you, they are excited about the momentum of healthy soils legislation sweeping the country at the state level, with over 250 bills introduced in the past two legislative sessions. A number of states have passed such legislation, often unanimously, and there is a draft legislation for Ohio generated as a starting point. and they're looking to build a coalition of support. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you for that, for reading that paragraph. I appreciate the sentiments of the author of that. And soil health is one of the things that really gets me going. And I really do believe that increasing soil health and soil resiliency is part of our risk management that we need to use in Ohio as well as clear across the Midwest. That and increasing your organic matter of your soils. Just 1% organic matter increase will get you a chance to hold an extra 25,000 gallon of water. And that works in dry times where you have a reserve, but it also works in wet times when it has additional holding capacity where you can take some of these larger rains. Anything that we can do to manage the risk of what we're happening today. I'm a big proponent of conservation tillage, keeping something covered on your ground all the time. We're implementing cover crops as a way to hold the soil in place, but as well as scavenge some of those excess nutrients that are going in our rivers and streams. Instead of letting them go, let's keep them on the soil where we can the plant takes it up and then it turns and decomposes and provides nutrient for the next crop. So again, my big thing is we can change the way we do productivity, but at the same time we can improve the environment. So I think there's real economic value in this. At the same time, what was good for me is to hear, what do customers want us to grow? And so let's look for other opportunities, whether you're small, medium, or large. We can all do a better job of growing crops. And so let's look at the environment. Let's figure out ways that we can to make it better. One of the things that my father told me when I bought the farm, he said, all I ask is you do is leave it in better shape than what you have gotten it. And I really think that that's a task that we should all be good for. And that's the other thing too, that what Solutions for the Land is all about is how do we find solutions that we can implement to make things better instead of always being the culprit of bad things happening. We can do things differently and we can improve the environment. We can also improve quality. We can improve diversity. We can improve our whole food system and the infrastructure too. I just might say that there's those 50 items that are, a lot of them are shovel ready. That's what phase 2 is going to be. We invite anybody that's listening to find one of those projects that you'd be willing to engage in. We're reaching out to everyone, that anybody that wants to improve Ohio agriculture and food security. There's something for you to do. So I invite you to roll up your sleeves, pull up your bootstraps, and help us make this thing a reality.
Yeah, Fred, I didn't hear you say anything about cover crops, so I think that's one of the ones that we really talked about. And as we look at the challenges and the water quality issues, soil health and how we manage the soil is going to be absolutely critical to that process, and as well as the entire crop diversification and opening up new markets. So we're really excited about that. When we talked about the challenges and the bills that are being introduced, I work a lot around the State House, and over the decades, the only time we ever really hear about agriculture when agriculture is being held to account, not as as the reason something has happened. And I think that we have an opportunity to change that dynamic now and put agriculture front and center as the solution to many of the challenges that we now face. And as I said, food is health, food is medicine is one that we believe can really bring down the overall cost to the state and to the federal government, allowing for additional resources to be invested in ensuring that Ohio's agricultural systems are being adaptive and being able to bring about, again, more diversification in the production of fruits and vegetables, our animal proteins, as well as our food grade grains for human consumption.
Well, I certainly agree with you, Lisa, on cover crops. I think cover crops should be on every single farm in the state of Ohio. In fact, every single farm in the Midwest, because when something's growing, it's also producing and it's sequestering carbon, and you're just making your ground much more resilient and getting ready for the next challenge it has. So we really think that introducing cover crops as a normal cropping practice is going to be key to getting our water quality up and running. And I'm anxious to see what we can do with H2 Ohio, as like you said, to get farmers more enticed into to maybe looking at other ways to do things that they haven't done before. So it's all going to have to be implemented on the farm in order for us to get the water quality issue fixed, as well as to maybe limit our greenhouse gas emissions.
All right. Well, I'm going to invite anybody else who may have a question for Fred and Lisa to either submit it through the Q&A box or through the chat box. There was one more message for you, Fred. It's from Michaela and her team. It says, Mr. Yoder, thanks for sharing your thoughts and experience in managing your farm. We're excited to collaborate with OSA partners around helping farmers find economically viable ways to increase soil health. So, we have one question. Well, Kari Carson said hi, so I don't know if you had a question or not.
Well, again, I would challenge everybody to help us. Let's get going. Let's make this a reality. One of the things that I really learned through this whole process was Lisa was just enormous help to me to understand, you know, how in the world people can still be hungry in Ohio and we have such an abundance of commodities. Well, maybe we need to be growing some other things besides commodities. Maybe we need to look at the distribution of how we do things. How do we give opportunities to smaller farmers to create markets and direct market, things like that. So it was really an exciting dialogue, but it's also now this time, once we got our challenge, now we need to get to work. Phase 2 means like our good friend AG always says, we're a good think tank, but now we got to get out of the tank. Let's do it. Let's get her done.
Fred, there is another question. It says, thank you for your presentation. I'm looking for ways to connect in Southeast Ohio. What is the best way to do so?
Well, Southeast Ohio has got some challenges because it's not a very, they don't have a lot of large farms and things like that, but there's still some ways that we can maybe come up with some crops that might thrive in that area. And Southeast Ohio is also a place where there's a lot of food deserts and things like that. So we have to figure out ways that when we do, and I think it's an opportunity for some direct marketing. You know, some of those fruits and vegetables that are pretty tough to get in there. Maybe if we started production of fruits and vegetables in those areas on a small scale, that everyone would benefit from that. Lisa might have more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, the food security rate in Southern Ohio is one of the highest in the state. Again, being able to ensure that we have the investment, I think, is really key to that. How do we make sure that we've got scalable systems, whether it's from a value-added standpoint to a production standpoint? I think we need to do a lot more education among our public policy makers about the role that agriculture plays in this, and make strategic investments are made. I think it's we need to ensure that those policymakers are front and center in the discussions that are going on. And there are a lot of groups down there that have been working for literally decades, that we need to make sure that they're continuing to be viable, and that as we have producers, farmers, and growers, can we open up additional markets for them as well? Certainly, we move a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables into that area. As Fred said, there are growing food deserts, and that's being compounded by the loss of other publicly funded programs, such as the loss of SNAP benefits or food stamp benefits, resulting in bad policy making decisions. But you also have institutional buyers that we need to make sure are purchasing locally as well from those producers. So again, there are food coalitions that I know there's a large one in the Athens area, and if you'd like to reach out to me, let's see if we can make the connection for you.
All right. So again, if anybody else has any other questions, I would encourage you to submit them. And if we don't have another question in the next few moments, we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right, going once, going twice. All right, so this, oh, wait, there's another one. One more. Oh, it says thanks that they will reach out via email. So thank you, Fred and Lisa, for spending some time with us this afternoon. Just a reminder, everybody, this is a recorded presentation, so it will be archived and sent out through the listserv, so you'll have the ability to review this talk. I can also share Fred and Lisa's PDF of their PowerPoint. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions for them or would like to be involved in their work, as Fred kind of mentioned, to reach out to them. And without further, we'll kind of wrap up today. So thanks again, Fred and Lisa, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you so much. Stay dry.